Getting older brings with it a lifetime of wisdom, experience, and perspective. But it also comes with habits we may not even realize we formed. Some are harmless. Others, though, can quietly push people away. Not because we've done anything wrong, but because the way we interact with others changes, and so do the social expectations around us. The truth is, as we age, many of us naturally shift our focus inward. We reflect more, speak more from memory, and sometimes stop noticing how those habits affect the people around us. The challenge isn't just physical, it's social and emotional too. Friends, neighbors, even close family members may start to pull away, and it's not always clear why. Often, no one says anything. People don't want to hurt feelings, so they simply avoid uncomfortable moments. That's what today is about, spotlighting those subtle, often overlooked behaviors that can quietly affect relationships. Things we may not see in ourselves, but others definitely notice. Not to criticize or embarrass anyone, but to create awareness. Because when we know what's going on, we can make small, meaningful changes that restore connection, deepen trust, and even renew joy in everyday conversations. Take Joe, for example. He's 74 and lives in Texas. A couple of years ago, he noticed fewer people dropping by. Neighbors who used to chat by the mailbox seemed to make excuses to move along. At first, he thought it was just a busy time of year, but a longtime friend pulled him aside and gently said, "Joe, you tend to talk over people and tell the same stories again and again. Folks don't want to be rude, so they just avoid the situation." That moment hit him hard, but it didn't crush him. Joe paid attention. He started listening more. And wouldn't you know it these days, he's the neighbor everyone looks forward to seeing. His porch is rarely empty. Moments like Joe's are more common than we talk about. Many older adults face social drift, not because of age itself, but because of these unspoken habits. That's why it matters to bring them to light. You deserve to stay socially connected, emotionally supported, and respected by those around you. And there's something powerful in knowing we still have influence over how we make others feel, how we carry ourselves, and how we stay engaged in the world. Sometimes just shifting the way we respond in conversation or becoming more aware of how we present ourselves can turn everything around. And the science backs it up. According to researchers at the Johns Hopkins Center for Geriatrics, maintaining strong social bonds helps protect mental sharpness, improves mood, and even supports better physical health in older adults. In short, healthy relationships are not a luxury. They're part of aging well. So as we go through today's video, I invite you to reflect, not to judge yourself, just to notice. You might recognize one or two habits in yourself, or perhaps in someone you care about. If so, that's a great starting point. Self-awareness isn't always easy, but it's what keeps us growing, keeps us respected, and keeps us close to the people who matter. Let's begin with one that's surprisingly common, but rarely brought up in everyday conversation. Habit number 1, oversharing personal health details in conversation. It's natural to want to talk about what's going on in your life, especially when it comes to your health. Doctor visits, new medications, test results, they're all part of the day-to-day reality for many older adults. And when you've been through a lot, it can feel like a relief to talk it out. You might even hope that sharing your story will bring you closer to others, especially those you love. But here's where things can get tricky. Not everyone knows how to respond to detailed talk about illness, symptoms, or treatments. Younger family members, casual friends, or even kind neighbors might not have the context or emotional space to stay engaged. Without realizing it, conversations can start to feel heavy, even one-sided. What began as a way to connect may actually push people away. This is something the Cleveland Clinic has studied closely. Their research shows that conversations focused too heavily on personal health, especially when not prompted, can create emotional distance, particularly with younger listeners. It's not that they don't care, it's that they may feel overwhelmed or unsure how to respond, especially if the tone is repetitive or the details are graphic. Nancy, 70, from Georgia, found this out the hard way. She noticed her grandkids stopped picking up the phone. Weeks would pass without a call. When she finally asked her daughter what was going on, she heard the truth. "Mom, they love you, but every time they call, you talk about your blood pressure, your knee injections, and the strange rash the doctor can't figure out. They don't know what to say." It stung. Nancy wasn't trying to complain. She was just sharing what was on her mind. But once she stepped back and thought about it, she realized how often the calls revolved around her discomfort and not their lives. So the next time they spoke, she started by asking about school, favorite games, and even the family dog. Her grandson said, "Nana, this is the best call ever." The weekly calls returned. The connection was back. This doesn't mean you should hide what's going on, but there's a balance. If someone asks how you're feeling, absolutely answer honestly, but keep it brief unless they truly want details. Save the longer, more personal health discussions for people who are emotionally ready for them, like close friends, support groups, or medical professionals. In social settings, try to keep the conversation two-sided. If you catch yourself talking about a new medication, consider shifting by asking, "But enough about me. What's going on in your world?" That one sentence can open the door to connection. It also helps to ask yourself, am I sharing this to inform, or am I hoping for comfort? If it's comfort you're after, that's human. But it may be more helpful to find someone who's also navigating aging or chronic illness. Peer support can be incredibly validating without the risk of burdening others. None of this is about hiding what you're going through. It's about strengthening relationships by making space for other people's stories too. And when that happens, conversations feel more like mutual exchanges, where you're not just heard, but also invited to hear others. That kind of balance builds connection, not just sympathy. Habit number 2, poor hygiene or appearance neglect. There's a quiet shift that can happen with age. The routines that once felt automatic, like shaving in the morning, brushing your hair, or putting on a clean shirt, start to feel optional. Maybe arthritis makes holding a razor painful. Maybe your energy isn't what it used to be. Or maybe somewhere along the way, a little voice whispered, "Who's going to see me anyway?" And you started listening to it more often. But here's the thing, how we care for ourselves affects how others see us, and more importantly, how we see ourselves. When grooming habits fade, it can unintentionally send a message to the world that we've given up. And while that might not be the case at all, people notice. They may not say anything out loud, but they may step back, make assumptions, or even begin to worry. The National Institutes of Health points out that maintaining simple grooming routines isn't just about appearances. It supports mental clarity and emotional stability. In other words, when we care for our bodies, our minds benefit too. It's not about looking young. It's about preserving your sense of dignity, confidence, and self-worth. Alan, 77 from California, experienced this firsthand. After his arthritis got worse, the bathroom became a place of frustration. Buttoning a shirt took ages. Shaving left his hands aching, so he started skipping steps. He wore the same sweatshirt for days. He let his beard go uneven. At first, he thought no one noticed. But then his daughter gently mentioned that he didn't seem like himself. She didn't judge. She offered to help. Together, they set up a grooming space with larger-handled tools, an electric razor, and a stable chair. She brought over clothes that were easier to put on and helped him rearrange his closet so he could reach things without strain. It wasn't a major overhaul, but it changed everything. Now, Alan says, when I pass the mirror, I stop and smile. I see myself again. Sometimes it's not about physical difficulty, it's emotional. If you've been through a loss, battled an illness, or felt down for a while, the idea of getting ready might feel pointless. But it's in those exact moments that small acts of care can lift you out of the fog. Even something as simple as washing your face, changing into fresh clothes, or applying a little cologne can reset your day. If grooming has become a struggle, there are plenty of tools that can help. Shower chairs, handheld shower heads, long-handled brushes, no-tie shoes, even button-free clothing options. Don't hesitate to ask a loved one to help you choose a haircut that's easier to manage or to join you on a shopping trip for a few new, comfortable outfits. These aren't vanity moves. They're confidence builders. It's also helpful to create small rituals. Maybe it's trimming your nails every Sunday, laying out your clothes the night before, or using a favorite moisturizer after a bath. Routines like these give structure to your day and remind you that you're still very much in the game. And remember, looking cared for doesn't mean looking perfect. It means showing the world and yourself that you're still showing up, that you're worth the time, the effort, and the attention. And once you do that, others respond to you with that same respect. Habit number 3, constant complaining or pessimism. It's natural to want to share your frustrations. Life isn't always easy, and as we get older, challenges can pile up. Aches and pains, loved ones moving away, technology that changes too fast. But when every conversation becomes a list of what's wrong, it can slowly wear people down, even the ones who care the most. People may start checking their watches when you talk, or worse, stop calling altogether. And often you don't even realize it's happening. The Mayo Clinic has found that frequent complaining isn't just hard on others. It actually deepens our own stress and lowers our mood over time. It becomes a loop. The more we complain, the more frustrated we feel, and the harder it becomes to connect with joy. Mary, 81 from Michigan, loved her book club. Every Thursday for 5 years, she met with 6 other women to drink tea and talk about literature. But over time, she noticed something was changing. The group text went quiet, the meetups got canceled, and when they did meet, the conversations felt shorter. Finally, a close friend pulled her aside and said gently, "You don't seem happy anymore. Every week it's your health, the news, or how things used to be." Mary was shocked but grateful. She took it to heart and tried something new. She started writing down 3 things she was thankful for each day. At first it felt silly, but slowly she noticed her tone shifting. Instead of saying, "Everything hurts today," she'd say, "I'm glad I was able to get outside for a few minutes." 2 months later, she was invited back to the book club, and this time people lingered to talk afterward. That's the power of a small shift in attitude. It doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending everything's perfect. It just means choosing not to let the hard things be the only things. If you find yourself focusing on what's wrong, try swapping complaints for curiosity. Instead of, "The doctor kept me waiting an hour," try, "Have you ever had to sit forever in a waiting room? What do you do to pass the time?" That opens the door to conversation rather than closing it with a vent. Another trick, storytelling. Turn the frustrating event into a tale with a little humor or irony. People are more willing to listen when there's a smile at the end, or ask questions instead of making statements. "What's been going well for you lately?" is a great place to start, and often invites the same question back. Gratitude doesn't erase life's difficulties, but it gives you space to also see the good. Maybe it's a warm cup of coffee in the morning, a grandchild's text, a neighbor's wave. These moments are often overlooked, but they're the threads that keep our days and relationships tied together. It's okay to have tough days. It's okay to need to vent. But if every encounter becomes heavy, people start to protect themselves by pulling away. And the very connection we're hoping for becomes harder to reach. If you're learning something valuable so far, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments. What's one habit you've personally worked on or noticed in others? Habit number 4, repeating the same stories without noticing. Stories are how we connect, teach, and preserve the past. They're little time machines that help us revisit joy, pride, and even hard-earned wisdom. But when the same story gets told again and again, especially within the same conversation, it can start to feel less like a gift and more like a skip on a record. This isn't about being forgetful or boring. In fact, repeating stories often comes from a place of comfort. Familiar memories feel safe and enjoyable to tell. Sometimes it's a meaningful moment that we carry closely, and other times it's just an easy way to fill silence. Mild memory lapses can also play a role, especially when conversations are happening frequently with the same people. But here's where it gets tricky. When repetition becomes too common, people may interpret it as a sign of cognitive decline, even if that's not the case. And even if they don't think that, they may simply tune out. Nods get shorter, smiles turn tight, and the storyteller misses the signals. Frank, 79, from Illinois, found himself in that exact spot. He adored his nephews and loved talking with them when they came to visit. But one afternoon, he overheard them laughing and calling him the parrot after he left the room. It stung, but it was also a wake-up call. Frank didn't get angry. Instead, he got smart. The next time they visited, he said with a grin, "Stop me if I've told you this one before, And more importantly, after his story, he'd ask, "What about you? What's going on at school this week?" Suddenly, the visits changed. The conversations flowed both ways, and the teasing, it stopped altogether. If you find yourself telling the same story, try writing it down. You might realize which ones you lean on the most and why. Keeping a small journal of your favorite life moments not only helps you vary what you share, it can become a treasured keepsake for your family someday. Another approach is to give your listeners room to share theirs. Try asking, "What's a funny memory from your last vacation?" Or, "What's the best advice someone's ever given you?" This turns the moment into a mutual exchange rather than a solo performance. And remember, there's nothing wrong with repeating a story once in a while, especially if it brings a smile or contains something meaningful. The key is self-awareness. A small phrase like, "Have I told you this before?" shows humility, humor, and care for the listener's experience. We all want to be heard, and often we share a story not just to relive it, but to feel connected. By making space for others and staying tuned in how our words are received, that connection only grows stronger. Habit number 5, flatulence and bodily sounds in public. As we age, our bodies develop their own rhythm, and sometimes that rhythm gets a little noisy. Flatulence, burping, stomach gurgles, they can sneak up at the worst moments. A quiet room, a serious conversation, or in Lillian's case, a heartfelt prayer circle at her Bible study group. Lillian, 72, from Florida, loved attending her weekly gathering, but she started noticing people shifting uncomfortably when they sat near her. One evening, after an unfortunately timed outburst, she felt deeply embarrassed. She went home that night fighting tears, not because of what happened, but because she feared she might have to stop attending something that brought her joy. The truth is, these sounds aren't about poor manners. They often come from real natural changes, slowed digestion, muscle weakening, or even side effects from medications. Yet despite being so common, they rarely get talked about openly. Instead, people feel ashamed, isolated, or even avoid social settings entirely. Lillian didn't want that, so she decided to speak with her doctor, who connected her with a dietitian. They kept a simple food journal for a couple of weeks and noticed patterns. Certain meals caused more gas, especially when eaten shortly before her group meetings. Small changes like avoiding beans and carbonated drinks in the afternoon and adding a daily probiotic made a real difference. She also learned that posture matters more than she thought. Sitting up straight after meals and taking a short walk helped keep things moving more quietly. And when something did slip out, a warm chuckle and a lighthearted comment, "Well, I guess my stomach's got opinions too," helped ease the tension. The key takeaway is this: bodily sounds are natural, but they don't have to control the room. Awareness and preparation can go a long way. A little planning, like adjusting meal times before a social event, can help prevent those awkward moments before they happen. And when they do happen, a touch of humor and grace makes all the difference. Our bodies change, but our sense of self doesn't have to suffer. It's not about perfection, it's about presence, confidence, and care for those around us. Habit number 6, speaking too loudly or too softly. Sometimes it's not what we say, but how we say it that makes the biggest difference. Over time, many older adults begin speaking much louder than they realize, or so softly that others have to strain to keep up. Either way, the result can be the same. People pulling back from conversations. Bill, 75, from Arizona, was puzzled when his weekly phone chats with old friends became shorter, less frequent. One day his niece finally said it. "Uncle Bill, I love talking to you, but it's hard to follow what you're saying." Sometimes his voice dropped too low. Other times he shouted without realizing it. The problem wasn't his words, it was the delivery. What Bill didn't know was that his hearing had slowly declined. And as we lose hearing, our own voice can sound different to us. Some compensate by talking louder, others grow quieter, unsure of how they sound. According to the Johns Hopkins Hearing and Aging Study, hearing loss often goes undetected for years, and the impact goes beyond missed words. It touches relationships, self-esteem, and even safety. Once Bill got his hearing checked, things turned around. Hearing aids helped him tune in again, not just to others, but to himself. He practiced speaking clearly, slowing down a bit, and checking in gently with friends. "Let me know if I'm being hard to hear." That small line invited connection instead of confusion. If you've ever noticed puzzled looks or people leaning in or backing away, it might be worth asking someone close, "Am I speaking clearly?" Not as a criticism, but as a way to reconnect. You might also try reading aloud each day to practice vocal tone. Or if you're in a group and unsure, look at the faces around you. Are they engaged or struggling to keep up? Volume, pace, and tone all matter, but they're surprisingly easy to forget as habits shift. The goal isn't to become a polished speaker, it's to be heard, understood, and welcomed in conversation. That's what brings people closer. Habit number 7, being dismissive of younger generations. It can happen in a split second, a comment that seems harmless but carries a sting. "Kids today don't know anything," or "When I was your age, we did things the right way." These kinds of remarks often come from a place of pride in one's life experience, but to younger ears they can sound judgmental, even dismissive. Roger, 80, from Washington, had always been close with his granddaughter, but one day he made a joke about her spending too much time on social media. She laughed it off, but he noticed she didn't call as often after that. Then she surprised him, inviting him to join her on a podcast she was starting. It was about bridging the generational gap, with each episode featuring conversations between them. At first, Roger was skeptical, but he gave it a try. Today, their show has over 10,000 listeners, and their bond is stronger than ever. The Harvard Adult Development Study highlights how connection across generations is not just emotionally rewarding, it can improve cognitive sharpness, mood, and even overall life satisfaction. When older adults engage with curiosity rather than criticism, something beautiful happens. Conversations open up, laughter is shared, and mutual respect grows. Being from a different time doesn't mean being out of touch. It means having wisdom to offer and space to learn. Asking a grandchild about their favorite music or letting them explain a new app or idea shows trust and respect. It says, "I see you. I'm interested." Of course, you don't have to agree with everything younger generations do, but starting with curiosity instead of critique keeps the conversation going. Even a simple shift from "that's silly" to "help me understand why that matters to you" can make all the difference. Roger often says the best thing he did wasn't starting a podcast, it was learning how to listen without judgment. And in doing that, he found new ways to share his own values, not by lecturing, but by connecting. Habit number 8, ignoring personal space or touch boundaries. Human connection is often expressed through touch. A warm hug, a reassuring hand on the arm, a gentle pat on the back. But as the world changes, so do people's comfort levels with physical contact. What once felt like a kind gesture might now be experienced as overwhelming or intrusive, especially by younger people who've grown up with stronger boundaries around personal space. Janice, 73, from New York, adored her great-grandson. She'd wrap him in a big hug every time he walked through the door. But over time, she noticed something subtle. He started pulling back. He'd shift away when she got close or hide behind his dad. It hurt. So one day, Janice gently asked, "Would you rather have a fist bump?" His eyes lit up, and he nodded. Now every visit starts with a joyful, bouncing fist bump, and a connection that's just as warm as a hug ever was. There's no shame in not knowing where someone's comfort zone is. It's all about being willing to ask and adjust. In today's culture, especially among younger people, touch is something that often requires a check-in. A simple, "Would it be okay if I gave you a hug?" shows respect, not distance. According to social behavior studies, personal space is highly individual and influenced by culture, past experiences, and even mood. What feels like closeness to one person might feel like pressure to another. That's why watching for cues, stepping back if someone steps back, noting if they stiffen during a touch, can be more meaningful than words. Touch is still powerful. A gentle squeeze of the hand when someone is grieving, a shoulder pat during celebration. But when we match it with awareness and permission, it becomes not just kind, but truly considerate. Janice now says she feels closer to her great-grandson than ever, Not because she insisted on physical affection, but because she let him lead. And the best part, he runs to her now, not out of habit, but out of joy. Habit number 9, interrupting or dominating conversations. Few things are as human as the desire to be heard, but sometimes that eagerness to share, connect, or make a point can lead to something we don't notice in ourselves. Talking over others, jumping in too soon, or steering every discussion back to our own story. Edward, 78, from Colorado, had always been the life of the party. Funny, warm, and full of stories. But one evening during a family dinner, his teenage granddaughter quietly said, "Grandpa, I want to be heard too." It hit him harder than he expected. He realized that in trying to connect, he'd sometimes taken over the conversation. From that moment on, he started doing something simple: pausing, waiting a few seconds before replying, and most importantly, asking others to share first. Interrupting doesn't always come from rudeness. It can stem from excitement or fear that we'll forget what we wanted to say. And sometimes, after years of needing to assert ourselves in work or family life, it becomes second nature to drive the dialogue. But the impact remains. People may begin to feel like their thoughts don't matter. This isn't just about manners, it's about presence. When we truly listen, we show others they're valued. The 2 ears, 1 mouth approach is a gentle reminder to spend twice as much time listening as speaking. That doesn't mean holding back your stories or ideas. It means sharing space with others and letting conversation be a mutual exchange. If memory worries are at play, like forgetting your point if you don't say it immediately, try jotting down a quick note while someone else is speaking. It allows you to stay engaged while also holding on to your thoughts respectfully. Another helpful tool is the full stop technique, letting someone finish not just their sentence, but their thought before jumping in. It may feel awkward at first, especially if you've always been a talker, but it builds trust and makes every exchange richer. Edward now says his relationships feel more balanced. He still tells great stories, but now they're woven between moments of genuine curiosity about others. And his granddaughter, she opens up more than ever. Every one of the habits we've talked about today comes from something deeply human, wanting to connect, to be understood, to feel comfortable in our own skin. They aren't signs of failure or weakness. They're just small pieces of behavior that, left unexamined, can slowly chip away at the closeness we want with the people around us. What matters most isn't whether you've ever repeated a story, spoken too loudly, or interrupted without meaning to. What matters is what you choose to do when you notice it. Graceful aging has nothing to do with perfection. It's about staying curious about ourselves. It's about being open to feedback, to change, to the possibility that small adjustments can bring big rewards. When we continue to grow, we hold on to something incredibly powerful: our dignity. We show our kids, grandkids, friends, and neighbors that aging doesn't mean fading away. It means evolving. It means showing up in ways that uplift the people we love. And here's the encouraging part. If you saw even one habit today that made you pause, that's not something to be ashamed of. That's a sign of awareness. And awareness is where all real growth begins. We've shared stories of people just like you. Folks in their 70s and 80s who noticed something, made a small change, and watched their relationships blossom again. You don't need to overhaul your whole life. Just pick one thing, one habit, one moment to pause before speaking, to ask instead of assume, to listen just a little more closely. And remember, you're not alone. These conversations are happening in living rooms, doctors' offices, and quiet moments of reflection all over the world. Let's keep having them together. Which of these habits do you recognize? Which one surprised you? Leave a comment below. We read every single one. Like, share, and subscribe so we can keep creating content that helps you live strong and age with pride.